But I wanted to share an idea with you. And a couple of months ago, and I'm going to make a political reference, just so you know. Vice President Kamala Harris, when she was first being introduced as the presidential nominee, and we were kind of getting to hear about her story and stuff, she said, "I'm not unfamiliar with the unlikely path." And there was some other discourse she was going on, but just that notion, I'd never really heard it articulated that particular way, but it's a human experience where we often are called to venture down an unlikely path. And we're all kind of path oriented, if we're kind of like in this practice and stuff like that. But the unlikelihood of starting at point A and ending up somewhere else that holds so much more promise. It's really an interesting aspect of life. And I wanted to just share a short story. And for those of you who have sat with me before, you may have heard some elements of this story told before. And I hate telling, I try to never say the same thing twice, but that may be pride, I don't know. But I'm going to share this story with you again, with some of you again. That's going to kind of highlight this idea about an unlikely path. And so this is a true story, and it took place in the late 19th century. And there was a young man who was in his teens, and he was just trying to figure out like what he wanted to do with his life, what was his calling, what was his purpose, like the teenage years. And it's just like, which way do I go? And the only thing that he really had that really kind of was like magnetizing for him was the example set forth by his grandfather and his father. And they both were community leaders in a lay minister or ministerial capacity. So they were like the church leaders, the preachers, the ministers, and everybody in the community kind of held them in high regard. And so the young man, seeing the role that his father and his grandfather played in the community and how kind of vital they were to the balance of that community, that was like one of the most crystallized examples of something that he wanted to emulate in his own life. However, he didn't really like schools. He didn't like institutions. And he tried his hand at going to like a theological seminary and this and that little organization, and it just didn't work out for him. And so he felt like he was kind of pigeonholed because he couldn't really find a path towards getting to that stage his father and his grandfather were at. So he was just kind of like, okay. So he kept at it, and he found himself at the door of a missionary organization. And I think the guy's name was Reverend Peterson or something like that. He was like in charge of it. And he said, you know what, you have a lot of potential, you're not going to be able to become a minister right away. But what I do have for you is I have an opportunity for you to be a trial missionary. And I'll put you on trial for 6 months. And the young man said, no, I don't have nothing to lose. I could check it out. So the young man packed up, and he was sent off to this community that was right on the border between Belgium and France. And the name of this community was called the Borinage. And the Borinage sounded like this really kind of opulent place, and the young man hadn't been there before. So he was like, yeah, I'm going to the Borinage, yeah. And so he gets there and he sees that the Borinage is actually a mining town. And there's this black soot just everywhere. Everything just has this kind of residue of coal. And it's dark and it's damp. And he sees the people. And they're kind of like the same way. They're kind of dark and kind of muted. And they're just kind of involved in this daily activity of going down into the mine until the sun goes down, and then they come up from the mine at dusk. And this is what they do. And there's not a lot of money. You know, they're living in very meager conditions. And so the young man just sees what he's asked to work with, and he just kind of gives himself to it. So he goes in, and his instructions were just to offer people prayer and, you know, maybe some occasional Bible studies or something as a missionary. So he does that, and he's getting in track with it, and he's going with it. And then the people start inviting him into their homes for like dinner. And then he began to really see how much of a difference his life was from theirs. Because they barely had anything. But what they had, their fragments and broken pieces, they offered to him. And it touched his heart. And it opened up something called compassion. Compassion, in its simplest term, simply means to be with whatever, but to be with. And so as he began to succumb to this call to be with the people, his heart opened up and he said, you know, I want to do more than just be a figure for prayer and Bible studies to this community that has opened itself to me. They barely have anything, but whatever I have, I want to make available to them. So he began giving his own food and sharing his own food with them. He took it further, and he began to offer them his clothing, went where it was needed. He took it even further, and he wanted to kind of be like them in a way that there would be no distinguishing between them and him because they had accepted him as their leader. He even stopped his hygiene routines because they weren't able to have the highest level of hygiene because of, you know, the poverty that was present there. So he gave his food, he gave his clothing, and he even kind of matched their level of hygiene. Compassion took him to identify with them to that degree. And they still held him in high regard as the missionary, the man of God, if you will. He was on, you know, cloud nine while giving up so much of what most of us would not really want to part with. And everything is in sync and in harmony. And a few months in, one of the leaders of the missionary organization came to do an inspection, to check in on him. And when the leader arrived, by the way, the name of this leader, the name that the tag name that they gave him, in French it was called Le Rocher de Dieu, which translated means the rock of God. So this guy's coming in full regalia, the missionary regalia, maybe the black and white outfit or whatever they had. He had whatever it was, he was the standard for missionaries. And he came to the Boronage looking for this trial missionary, and he found him. And when he found him, his eyes just kind of bulged out, and he was looking at him like, what did you do? In the process of compassion, the young man had kind of transfigured himself to become the people that he was serving. He no longer looked like a missionary. And the prototype of a missionary is standing there. They were sure they do. And he's like, you have completely lost it. And so they were sure they do fired him. And completely dashed the hopes and the dreams and all of the connectivity and work that the young man was doing in that community. He's like, you've just taken this way too far. Missionaries don't need to go that far. But compassion did need him to go that far. So the guy left. The young man's assignment is over. He's allowed to stay in the community for a while. But he no longer had the authority to be functioning in that community. So the young man was just kind of dashed and trying to figure everything out. And he packed up his little bag with, a handful of drawings that he had, and he decided to go and visit Reverend Peterson, who sent him out there in the first place. And he showed up at Reverend Peterson's office and was like, yeah, the guy came out, he told me I didn't make the cut. I thought everything was going great. And Reverend Peterson consoled him and everything. He said, that's going to be okay. He's like, what do you got in your bag there? So the young man pulls out the bag and he's got these drawings. They're just made, some drawings he made with a pencil. So Reverend Peterson's going through the bag and looking at these drawings, and he's really amazed. And he's like, wow, you really have a talent here. You did this while you were at the Boronage? He's like, yeah, I just drew pictures of the people. I really got to know them, and I just wanted to catch them in certain parts of their day without them really knowing it. He's like, you should really pursue art as a calling. And so the young man left his office, put his drawings back in, and went back to the Boronage, and he stayed there for about a year just germinating on its idea. Then he finally got the courage and the clarity to leave and to go back to the city to actually pursue and see what this unlikely path may unfold. The name of this man was Van Gogh. Vincent Van Gogh. And Van Gogh didn't live a well-buttoned, tidy, well-ordered life. And one of the reasons why, in my contemplations, why I've looked at him so much was because even though he became probably one of the world's most famous artists, the one thing that he was really, really passionate about, he was denying. And nothing that he did after that period of time of being denied as a missionary really, really did it for him. because he wanted to be a minister. And the unlikely path led him to be an artist. And I've never been able to ask him, but my senses point me to the idea that his artistry never really hit the spot like ministry did. But I want to ask you a question. If you look at his trajectory in the unlikely path in a linear fashion, one thing contributes something to the other. What does compassion and his deep orientation to that which is required of him and demanded of him in the Borinage, what did that contribute to his artistry? The art was the unlikely path. What does your unlikely path and what elements are bringing out the best of you that are contributing something to your life that you can't even understand right now? There's a potential in each of us here for that dynamic to be playing out right now. Something that could be very well looked at as, whoa, this is a very stellar part of practice, but you don't see it that way because it's just something that you're giving yourself to. But somebody else could say, oh, whoa, you're really so open. And what you're doing is just touching so many people. But you don't see it that way. It's just natural. But what does that have, what is that contributing to? I don't know if there's any way you can really know right now. But this is one of the things that I've been able to glean from observing the life of what is known as a remarkable and troubled human being. I respect the struggle of human beings. The tragic nature of it. I could go on, but I won't. There's just something underneath your own struggles that's asking you for something. And you know our time is up. I mean, our time is up. It's 11:30. I'm sorry to be so abrupt and drop this on you like that right here, but maybe there can be another conversation we can have. Yeah. So I'll say this, if we'll close the session right now, I'll stay around for maybe 5 or 10 minutes or so. And if anyone wants to ask anything, I'll be here for them. For now, we'll make the dedication of merit. And we want to offer the merits of our practice, which were a collective of our broken pieces and fragments, hopes and aspirations, pain, tears, and grief. We want to offer these collectively as a whole to identify with those who are in pain, who are in grief, who feel broken, who feel disparate, who feel separate, who feel alone, who feel subdued. And may the merits of our practice meet them, and may it somehow open their eyes, that they can take a better assessment of what's really happening for them, in the present moment. Thank you so much.